Yes, yes, everybody. 1,000 welcomes to our little show, beaming to you from the corner of the internet. Live and direct from Johannesburg, South Africa. Can you believe it? The Southern Hemisphere. This is us, baby. And over and above a very big welcome to episode 23 of Storytime. I would just like to welcome the new people that have stumbled across this random kind of bumbling that I do every so often, about once a week. And basically, we are going to check this evening some very interesting themes. Episode 23, can you believe it? We're already on 23, is going to be about Nikola Tesla versus his dream. Nikola Tesla's dream versus the deep state, basically. And as I said, to the new people joining us, if you don't quite know what we do here, it's basically just a little hoedown. Your friendly host, myself, Euphoria, just telling you a bunch of random things. We try and connect some interesting dots and bring a little bit of the mystery in our history forward. Sometimes you think you know how things work. You've read the textbooks, you were told the stories, but as you get a little bit older and your information becomes a little bit more high definition, becomes formatted into a much bigger picture kind of view, suddenly you start to realize that the facts that we follow or are told to follow, sometimes they don't always add up to that good old thing we call reality. Now, again, I'm no purveyor of truth. I think I've got a much better track record in, let's say, the mainstream media, so I may mix up my dates. I may get a fact or two wrong. I might screw up pronunciations of people's names, but hey, as I said, I'm just a friendly dude on the internet that is just happy to be sharing this time with you. And this is a dialectic conversation, so please feel free to drop in the chat, send us your emails. You can find us always at theprimematterpodcast@gmail.com. We put up these videos on YouTube a couple of hours after the live stream. So let's jump straight into it. Episode 23, oof, live and direct, here we go. Hope you got your warm beverages, because we're going, forgive the phrase, balls deep this evening. I've had to make myself an extra big cup of coffee, you know what I'm saying? Ah, beautiful. So, with all of the introduction out of the way, let's jump straight into it. This evening, I would like to talk to you about perhaps my favorite human, and many would argue probably one of the most important human beings in human history. And you may dispute that, but I believe Nikola Tesla is perhaps the person that we should have more monuments to. Every child should know this name. And I say this very specifically because much of the technology used in this very live stream comes from the man. And we've spoken about Nikola Tesla in some of our previous story times. We linked Tesla to his technology and the UFO file. And in the last few episodes of Storytime, we really have been diving deep into the UFO conspiracy, or the UAP conspiracy, I should say. There's definitely something going on there. But what the CIA is presenting to us through people like Grush and Lou Elizondo and many of these other people, let me reserve my more colorful comments till a more specific analysis is made. But let me just say that these folks are CIA-trained counterintelligence. They're there to give you a certain narrative. The CIA is not your friend. The government is not there to protect you. It is there to serve you. And I don't care what country you come from. The government only exists because the people will it to be. There's a social contract that we tacitly make a part of, and we choose to follow laws because we believe in the rule of law and that the government is made for and by the people. But unfortunately, in 2023, welcome, for those of you time traveling to this particular point in time, the story is not as free and fair as we would like. The theory, the ideal version of freedom, democracy, liberty, and a deeper belief and connection to the grandness of creation, these concepts are beginning to become lost to us. And as we lose that, so too we begin to lose much of what glues together society and cultures and histories. So humanity's got its back against the wall, in my humble opinion. We are doing great in many other things. Some will argue that we have more technology than ever before, higher levels of education, greater access to money and opportunity. But I will gently counter that point and say, with all these great technologies, you can use it for good. Like a hammer, you can build a house. And if you use it for bad, you can create great harm and tyranny and death and destruction. So it's not the technology's fault, but it's the psycho-spiritual level we are as humans in terms of being able to harness that technology in a positive direction for our future. Now, I'm mentioning this because in the UFO side of things, whether you believe in it or not, and if you just want to call the phenomena we encounter some kind of unknown thing that needs to be studied and can perhaps bridge some gaps and create some, beyond next generation technology for us, if you're just thinking strictly of the technology, all the same, there is something amazing kind of going about us. It's happening to us now, and it's been happening to us for as long as humans can remember and have recorded history. Possibly before we were even Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans as we kind of know them today. So the point I'm trying to make is that we focused a lot on the technology side of things and UFOs, and we kind of got a little bit deep in the weeds there. And that's fine. Sometimes we need to have a bit of precision about what's happening in the swamp. But sometimes it's good to also just take a step back and realize that when we're just talking about technology, it all kind of seems to funnel back to a certain source. Now, it's not only one source. Although I'm going to talk a lot about Nikola Tesla this evening, it's not just him that has contributed to the grandness of humanity, but he's a special case that when you look at it, it's kind of like a compression of all the amazing events that separate us from technology that takes us forward, from a mindset that allows us to psycho-spiritually use that technology in a positive way. And we've looked at how that can be used in a negative sense. We've looked at continuation of governments. We've looked at breakaway civilizations. We've looked at all manner of sociopathic human groups, very small groups, but groups nonetheless that are very powerful and have nearly infinite resources, and see the world very differently to us and have grand plans and great armies to enact these plans. So as I said, humanity's on a precipice, and that's why I thought it would be interesting this evening to take a big step back, look at one of my heroes, and again just tie this idea of how the current disclosure isn't what we want, but we must be demanding that the technology is brought forward. Whatever's going on, even if there's no aliens, bring forward Tesla's technology. Let's see what's going on there. Bring forward Moray's technology. Let's see what's going on there. you'll see that a lot of the things that we look at this evening in terms of technology have all got a military application. And so that's why they disappear into the shadows. That is why when Tesla died penniless in his New York apartment, first people on the scene were government there to get his work, you know. John Trump under the direction of Vannevar Bush, and we'll look at all of that this evening. So this is the point that we're trying to look at, is how are we going to, as a species and as a human race, really hold dear humans that have gone a great length to try and advance our evolution through history, and those mofos that have kind of held us back on the other side. Now, of course, it's not all clear as good guys and bad guys. There's a spectrum. Not every human is perfect. And I can attest. So we'll see that it's not ever a straight line, but at least what will jump out very clearly is the fact that some humans with great intentions for our great collective as humanity really have been able to push us forward leaps and bounds. It's weird. We would be otherwise using sticks and stones and spears, and we were primitive for thousands of years before there was just a sudden golden enlightenment and developed everything all at once. It's a great mystery, you know, language and maths and astrology and sorry, I said astrology, but I meant astronomy. Back in the old days, those two things were quite mixed because of myth and all kinds of things. But not to digress. This evening, we kick off our conversation, as I said, this man here. Let me pull him up on screen, shall I? Good old Nikola Tesla. What a champion. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Nikola Tesla. Keep his image here on screen whilst we just chat a little bit. Because whilst it's easy to dig into, you know, easy facts, he's well documented in history, so you'll find a lot of very easy facts, for example, on Wikipedia and things like that. I want to take us a layer deeper, because this man is amazing in ways that the average history teacher wouldn't really be able to tell you. It took me quite some time to put it all together. And the first thing that I want to just mention, because you'll see here, we're going to move very quickly from Nikola Tesla through the presidential administrations and then to the high technology of scalar and directed energy weapons. I want to just try and ground this all in the fact of how the mind, how the individual, how the essence of that thing that is existing in the world is able to tap into great information and bring forward to the entire human race incredible advancements, just like that enlightenment where language and farming and great building of all these amazing megaliths and such sort of came forward. Now, when we talk about Nikola Tesla, the thing that really jumps out at me is that there were some very interesting facts about his early life that people kind of miss. You know, so everybody, for example, knows he was born in what is today Croatia, previously Yugoslavia, and even previously then the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You know, he was born mid-19th century in 1856. and he would live a long life. He would see the Manhattan Project, many amazing changes to the world. Now, I've said this in a previous story time, that Nikola Tesla and everything from pre-World War One into World War One and then after World War Two, that stretch of time completely reshaped humanity. The introduction of industry and technology and the mastering of electricity and then quantum mechanics really changed the way we understood the nature of reality. Prior to this, we were quite comfortable in the occult. We were quite comfortable in the mystical. We were quite comfortable in the superstitious and the religious and the just intangible things that formed our belief and cultural systems back in the day. There were great stories that we've brought forward from the annals of human history. Great feats of miracles and magicians performing incredible manipulations of reality. Alchemy was as simple a thing as we think of chemistry today. These were very different times. Now, as I mentioned, in the 1800s, the world was a different place. And, here comes Tesla, born to a father who was a professional soldier in the Austro-Hungarian wars, and who knows the kind of horrors that he must have encountered in those kinds of conflicts, where there's no modern day supply line and morphine and all the benefits that we have today, such as penicillin and things like that. It was terrible. An infection could kill you. And even if it killed you, sometimes people didn't even know what they died from back in those days. So, those horrors are probably what turned him into a priest. This is now Tesla's father. And Tesla's father, he wanted for Tesla also to, sort of involved in the priesthood and be academic and all those things. But Tesla, as a child, was always having what he deemed strange visions. It seemed, from what I've gathered, that the barrier between his imagination and his everyday perception of basic things around him were very blurred. And this caused him quite a bit of discomfort at the beginning. He describes how, for example, how if a word was spoken, it would be brought into his reality, and it would remain before his eyes for hours, it's like that. And it was really difficult for him because, as a young child, he didn't have good experience of putting his mind to the task of really channeling his genius and having control of the mental pictures. And we'll look at this a little bit later, how he overcame this. But, basically to surmount this whole situation that he was facing, he moved to the world of thought forms. And he talked about these thought forms. He basically created ideas, and he described them as from a world beyond. So not the daily world, but from somewhere else. He would create these thoughts which would channel the very powerful imagination that he had into great flows that he was able to then sort of direct. And from this, I'm going to read as many Tesla quotes as I can this evening, so forgive me. Sit back and relax. So, from one of his quotes, he says to us that I saw new scenes. These were at first blurred and indistinct, and they would flit away when I tried to concentrate my attention upon them. But they gained strength and distinctness, and finally I assumed the concreteness of real things. Finally, I suppose, the thought forms gained distinction. Now, if you're trying to understand what Tesla meant there, remember that often he would envision his entire invention and see it working in his mind, and then merely just jot down everything in one go. So he goes on further here to say, I soon discovered that my best comfort was attained if I simply went in my vision further and further, getting new impressions all the time, and so my mind began to travel. And so I began to travel, and of course, in my mind. Sorry, I completely butchered that. But it's that simple fact that he was going inwards for his knowledge, for his experience, and that these had a relationship to the world outside. But from this new place, there was less limitation to the very essence of his mind, and this allowed him great insights. He said, every night and sometimes during the day, when alone, I would start on my journeys, see new places, cities, and countries. I'd live there, meet people, and make friendships and acquaintances, and however unbelievable, it is a fact that they were just as dear to me as those in actual life, and not a bit less intense their manifestations. It kind of reminds me of one of the Star Trek episodes where they come across a probe and Picard ends up having what in time term on the Enterprise was maybe a few hours, was in his mind an entire lifetime. He had a family, he had children. When he came back, it was a devastating shock to him to be pulled out of one timeline straight back into another, have this warping of this temporal reality. But Tesla learned to harness these kinds of journeys in his mind. Already here you can start to see the traces of basic shamanism, right? Basic shamanism, wherever you come from in the world, is using your spirit to contact a great beyond. And that is all through the mind-body relationship and the connection to the universe. You'll see again that theme come up again and again. And, when Tesla was 17, that's about the time when he started to master these techniques well enough to begin creating inventions. He said that he was having very strange visions, and these visions would bring to him information that he would then, explore and interpret and perceive as these great projects. So because of this ability to visualize things in 3 dimensions, as a child it was a curse. He didn't have control of his mind. It became a very, very powerful tool for him as he became much, much older. And I think that that's not stressed very often. A lot of inventors today build upon little incremental adjustments to previous inventions. If you can make it just a little bit more efficient, most of Tesla's inventions just kind of blew everything out of the water. It was kind of the Leonardo da Vinci of I wouldn't say of our times, but I mean, we're still using his technology. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. So, now, I want to mention here that Tesla found different ways to harness the power of his mind. But one of the things that gave him quite a profound knowledge was also his exploration of Eastern, I guess you would call it metaphysics. Some call it a religion, but the beliefs are deeper. They are metaphysical in the sense that they look at the very essence of creation. Even their most revered gods are part of this manifestation. So, as mentioned, Tesla has quite an interesting mindset on this whole thing. And he eventually started using a lot of Sanskrit in, the descriptions he thought of and applied to his physics. And, these Sanskrit terminologies come from the Vedas. So it's all from the Vedic traditions and cosmology and religion, and it's not quite a religion as far as I understand, or the way it's been described to me. But he had a very good friend, Swami Vivekananda. Let's see if I got that right. Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda. And, this was a very good friend of his who he spent a lot of time with and brought to him quite a lot of the deep mysteries about the relationship between energy, matter, and consciousness. And, whilst we talk a lot about all kinds of things, notice how these concepts, like the interaction with consciousness and energy and matter being one of the features of a UAP control system, that's, for example, one of the things that have been reported. Now, I'm not going to always try and link it back to this UAP thing, but it's just little tidbits that I found interesting that link together because there is a very close tie. As I mentioned, there is quite a bit of work done to show how a lot of the technology that Tesla created went straight into the military. So we really need to look at some of that as we go forward. Can't completely ignore it. But just going back to Swami Vivekananda, they've got quite an amazing website that they created in honor of Tesla that's keep a lot of his literature and a lot of his teachings kind of propagating through time, and it is sometimes quite important to bring that kind of forward. This ability to use terminology from the Eastern mystical schools is really what allowed him to have the right conceptual framework for a lot of the things that he did and a lot of the technologies that he then went on to form. So, as I mentioned, this makes Mr. Tesla quite a remarkable scientist in that regard. A lot of scientists that were very prominent in our history had very deep spiritual beliefs, but very few were able to take those beliefs and interpret them straight into scientific exploration. So one of the things that makes Tesla such an incredible contribution to our history. So, right, let's change it up a little bit here, because great things began to happen with Tesla a little bit after he fell ill and then, went to visit a friend to try and heal. And they were walking through the park. And it was quite incredible because, good old Tesla says that his friend was reading him a passage from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's book called Faust. And there was an interesting passage in Faust that really caught Tesla's eye. And this was basically in Budapest, and he describes Goethe's quote as, "The glow retreats, done is the day of toil. It yonder hastes, new fields of life exploring. Ah, that a wing could lift me from the soil, upon its track to follow, soaring." And when Tesla heard those words, he fell into some kind of a trance. He describes that the vision struck him. He, for example, began staring at the sun, and his friend was so alarmed that he wasn't responding and, staring at the sun, that he immediately got him onto a park bench. He didn't want to sit, and from that moment, Tesla claims that he had the first vision of a magnetic whirlwind that then became his electrical motor. And as is a little nod to Mr. Tesla, always keep that patent not too far. Here we go. This is the patent here. The electrical generator. And this was the electrical whirlwind that came to him in his mind. You can definitely read how he writes this patent. But what is incredibly interesting is that from this electrical generator, a couple of important and groundbreaking technologies came forward. Because not only did he develop a generator that is able to take electricity and turn it into motion or kinetic energy, but he also developed a way to do the opposite, is take motion and turn that into energy, and make things that were able to transmit and receive energy and begin to use a whole different spectrum of reality. Now, as we begin to dive much deeper into Nikola Tesla, one of the fascinating things is, I sometimes mention to you that his technologies were constantly being taken up by the military-industrial complex. Here's another one, for example. This is the method and apparatus for controlling mechanisms of moving vessels or vehicles telematically. So this is the teleautomaton. Basically, it's radio controlled. So if I flip this for you, and see it's got a little propeller there, and it's got a electrical system, and it floats, and it basically goes, and you can turn that into not only a boat, but any kind of robot that you can operate from a distance. So, radio controlled. And of course, this is the very start of where your UAV systems come from. So when, Dick Cheney wants to, or Rumsfeld, or John Brennan, or Obama, or Bush, or Trump, or anyone wants to, drone strike a wedding full of civilians to maybe take out one or two targets. This is the automatic system that they basically use. It's become more advanced, but the patent technology is, that's where it began, so to speak. So back to the electrical engine and good old Nikola Tesla. So, as I mentioned, he made good friends with Swami Vivekananda, and he used a lot of that technology on the Eastern mysticism side to pour forward inventions that completely changed the way the world worked. And no one was at his level at the time. What was really tragic is that his only wish was to bring this invention of the rotating magnetic field to his great, he was a great admirer of Thomas Edison, so his great hero. And he ended up finally working for Thomas Edison, and we'll see that he was not treated kindly because he became an immediate competitor and was passed off as a kook, as a crazy man, person who in some cartoons and movies was made out to be quite an evil person, good old Nikola Tesla. And I don't believe he had a bad bone in his body, in my opinion. I mean, he did develop a death ray, but I mean, that's a different story. It's supposed to be for defensive use. Now, we'll get to that. I want to get back to this thing of the rotating magnetic field. All right, now, the rotating magnetic field is absolute, and I want to state this full screen. It is the absolute core of the technology. When you rotate a magnetic field, you end up with interesting effects on energy, gravity, and electromagnetism. There's a strong connection to all of that we don't yet understand. We're looking for that in the form of a theory of everything. But this concept of a rotating magnetic field is very, very powerful. And I'm going to explain this to you in a certain sense, just how powerful it is, because, it's fun. You kind of have a cell phone and you might operate electrical things and all kinds of stuff that Tesla created, but sometimes we don't understand the world that Tesla envisioned for us back in the 1800s, at the turn of the 20th century, sorry. So we need to remember that Tesla's technology comes from these deep visions. And from these deep visions, he gets things that not only change the world, but also during the time just before World War I and World War II, created a great strategic potential for various nations of the world. Now, at this time, he's living in America at the Waldorf Astoria. And, he's often seen like in the restaurant, kind of full tuxedo, sitting by himself eating. And he would be very obsessive compulsive. Would do things in certain numbers, avoid cracks, and he was kind of superstitious in that way. But what really then kicked things forward was when he spent a bit of time again outdoors in the open. He had a retreat in the Rocky Mountains, and because it had very incredible lightning storms in that section of the world, and because he had such a powerful mind that was very sensitive and astute in terms of his senses, he noticed that the thunderbolts could be timed and that there was an energy wave that he could pick up in packets, which was the early formation of a kind of quantum mechanics. Now, I say a kind of quantum mechanics because eventually, Tesla had a very completely different view of what energy and matter were and how they, related to each other. Much closer, let's say, to Steinmetz or Heaviside or Townsend Brown. He had very great insight in that regard, but it doesn't square very easily with the overall atom winner and general relativity winner of Albert Einstein. He's the one that makes it into the history books as the great mind of general relativity and physics. Nikola Tesla was also, in a certain sense, deep in the military technology. He wasn't invited into the Manhattan Project, but definitely his insight went into it. So, he rubbed shoulders with Oppenheimer and with every major thinker that we are still, teaching in our schools today. But just going back, I wanted to just chat to you about this time that he had in Colorado. He was talking about the lightning. The lightning is what gave him his next patent. It's kind of like a pylon for the utilization of radiant energy. And again, this came from his very sensitive nature and being able to notice these subtleties about not only the sound and the energy, but how sound and energy related. And as I said, this is very different to the kind of physics that, not very different, but it's markedly different from the atomism we look at today. And I'll show you a very interesting video, perhaps closer to the end of this stream. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've just about there at we've almost hit our hour mark, which is about halfway. So thank you so much for joining us. It really is a pleasure to have you join us here at Storytime 23. We're looking at the brilliance of Nikola Tesla and the dream he had for humanity, and of course the nightmare that the deep state is using from the foundations of his technology. And to really highlight this, we were talking about how Tesla had amazing insight from his deep spiritual and metaphysical beliefs. So when he was in Colorado, he had this amazing concept for how to use radiant energy and created this, it's kind of like a pylon, a receiver, if you would, that was able to not only receive but transmit high voltage electricity. And because of his understanding of the way energy traversed, or traversed is maybe not the correct word. Basically, he understood the, in my opinion, much better the nature of reality in its fundamental level. He had this concept of the superluminous ether, and this concept, we'll see, links further to the difference between transverse and longitudinal waves. Some call them, that is the transverse waves, scalar waves. Sorry, the longitudinal waves are scalar waves. So we'll look at this in just a moment, but I really wanted to focus on the Tesla coil that he created in Colorado, because this was an incredible tool that eventually we'll see turns into something like HARP. It had such incredible abilities. And because of his understanding of the nature of the very essence of reality, he could not only transmit but receive this without it needing to travel as a normal atom or particle would. So it was instantaneous, lossless energy at a distance. Look at this a little bit more precisely, but the energy coil from Tesla was really great technology that we seem to have just forgotten. Well, not let's say the militaries and the governments, but in the mind of the general public. We see a Faraday cage and some Van der Graaf generators, and we say like, hey, look, that's Tesla. These arcs basically. But there's so much more to that, and as I mentioned, his technologies in his mind were for everyone, everywhere, all the time, free. It was a part of nature that he discovered. And so it was for the entire planet. The very planet itself was a giant conductor to him. He basically put it this way, right? He said that, let me find this quote. He says here, "Impossible as it seemed, this planet, despite its vast extent, behaves like a conductor of limited dimensions. The tremendous significance of this fact in the transmission of energy in my system had become quite clear to me. Not only was it possible to telegraphically transmit messages to any distance without wires, I also recognized long ago that we are able to impress upon the entire globe the faint modulation of the human voice." So that's wireless voice transmission, He further says, "Far more significant is the ability to transmit power in unlimited and almost, in unlimited amounts to almost any terrestrial space without loss." That's incredible, So he basically was led to this conclusion that the electrical properties that he discovered could be used to our advantage. The very nature of the Earth and the way the ground and the upper atmosphere had this relationship could create almost unlimited quantities of electricity. And we know this because even in the California Institute of Technology, they've followed this technology. They can only get an optimal figure of like 40 something in terms of the microwaves. And I think they can only transmit it at a distance of a mile. And they're still studying it. So, who knows where that technology went. I must have read this a decade or two ago. So, they're far behind. Tesla was able to transmit things. He wrote to Liberty magazine in 1935. Here's the quote. 9th of February 1935, Liberty magazine says, "My invention requires a large plant. Once it's established, it will be possible to destroy anything, men or machines, approaching within a radius of 200 miles. It will, so to speak, provide a wall of power offering an unsurpassable obstacle against any effective aggression." So we're going to look at this a little bit later, but you can see already the range that he was talking about for this unlimited power was 200 miles, no problem. It basically made a solid shield. Now, what is super fascinating about this, right, is that we begin to see the military applications of Tesla's technology. You know me, I absolutely love the source documents. So if you go to the CIA reading room, you can have a look at Star Wars Now. This is a document that was only declassified in 2003, but written in 1984. So, T.E. Bearden. Now, in this document, he basically talks quite a lot about the Soviet system to replicate some of Nikola Tesla's technology. Whether this was directly from spying on Tesla, which doesn't seem to be the case, or whether they just sort of came up with this more naturally, which, as I feel, seems to be more the case. Either or, there's quite a lot of evidence for this Bohm-Aronoff effect and scalar interferometry. This is where the weaponization of Wardenclyffe Tower comes from. So here it is here, right? This is Wardenclyffe, and Wardenclyffe Tower is basically what he tried to create with JP Morgan's money. And what the books say is that he was so focused on just the experiment that he had no sense of like the business side of things, and the money just ran out. That's disputable. Tesla was a genius, and numbers were his thing. So we do know that eventually Wardenclyffe was destroyed because JP Morgan pulled out his money. But it's amazing because, you know, as I said, Edison turned on him as well. We all remember the electrocution of the elephant committed to death. Executed it with AC technology. Show how terrible Tesla's alternating current was compared to Edison's direct current. And there was a great propaganda against Tesla. So they destroyed Wardenclyffe. But Wardenclyffe was supposed to be the centerpiece, what Tesla called the world wireless system. So let me bring that on screen for you here, so you can see Wardenclyffe and the wireless system we're talking about. So here's Wardenclyffe. As you can see, it's unfinished. It never got fired up. This was supposed to provide lossless wireless technology at a great radius for many people, and be able to even penetrate the upper layers of the atmosphere, and even possibly provide power across the world, even technology. So this is Wardenclyffe. You can see here that, as I mentioned, it was supposed to be a part of the wireless system. Let's see here. Bring it up on screen for you guys again. Now this is, at the turn of the 20th century, Tesla proposed telecommunications and electrical power to be delivered, designed, my apologies, let me try that again. So, telecommunications and electrical power designed by inventor Nikola Tesla. This was supposed to be a delivery system, and his theories of using the earth and the atmosphere as electrical conductors, he claimed would allow for transmission of electrical energy without wires on a global scale, as well as point-to-point. Now, point-to-point is great, because point-to-point, you see, like now, when you're setting up 5G towers everywhere to have higher rates of transmission, these towers have to have line of sight. If they don't have line of sight, the data can't travel as deeply through walls and things like that. Whereas Tesla's technology was point-to-point. You created a source of transmission. You could even pick up energy at a distance, apparently. You can see here that at the end by the end of the 1900s, he had convinced JP Morgan to finance and construct a wireless station called Wardenclyffe. Based on his ideas, he was trying to transmit messages across the Atlantic to England and to ships at sea. His decision to change the design to include wireless power transmission to better compete with Guglielmo Marconi was met with Morgan's refusal to fund the changes. So Guglielmo Marconi was basically in Europe developing the first usable radio that was able to be developed at scale. And so there's great, let's just say, tension as to whether there was first Tesla or first Marconi being the first to the radio. But it seems in essence that Tesla's technology was always just the basis of it anyway. And you can see that they pulled the funds on Wardenclyffe and basically put that whole project of free wireless technology and voice communication centered completely out the window. And as I mentioned, good old Tesla died absolutely penniless at the Waldorf in New York. Now, what I wanted to mention here is, again, not only did this wireless system allow you to transmit information around the earth, kind of like HARP does. Now, HARP recently has been handed off to an academic institution, so it's no longer a military installation, but I'll show you something interesting about where it might have gone just now. But basically, this would rid us of the need for oil. See that by this cartoon here. It would rid us of the need for these, wars to have energy for development. That's why basically we occupy Syria and parts of South America and Africa, and it's terrible. Something like this would change humanity forever. And Tesla wanted to give that shielding technology because, as I said, not only could this be a wireless system used for good and for development, powering everything, it could also be used as a defensive system. And that's where his technology goes dark, because you'll see here, let's see, where is Tesla? Suppose we have to himself. There we go. All right. So he died on the 7th of January 1943, aged 86. He died basically penniless in the Waldorf. And who were the first people on the scene? Let's see here what Wikipedia has to say, because it's very interesting. I want to see if it contradicts my beliefs. So, here we go. On the 7th of January, at age 86, Tesla died alone in a room number 3327, which, for those of you that do numerology, you'll see why I mentioned Tesla being a little bit autistic about the numbers. His body was found by maid Alice Monaghan. As she entered Tesla's room, ignoring the do not disturb that Tesla had placed on the door 2 days earlier, she found him there and immediately called Assistant Medical Examiner H.W. Wembley, who examined the body and ruled the cause of death had been coronary thrombosis, a type of heart attack. 2 days later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation ordered that the alien property custodian, so not that kind of aliens that we're talking about usually on this platform, but the alien property custodian to see. Goodness. Suspense. Try that one more time. So, to seize Tesla's belongings, John G. Trump was an American electrical engineer and a professor at MIT, very well known and serving as a technical aide to the National Defense Research Committee. Now, the National Defense Research Committee was headed by Vannevar Bush. We'll see in a moment. So, after a 3-day investigation, Trump's report concluded that there was nothing which could constitute a hazard in unfriendly hands, stating that Tesla's thoughts and efforts during the last 15 years were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, often concerned with the production of wireless transmission power, but did not include new sound or workable principles or methods for realizing such results. In a box purported to contain Tesla's death ray, Trump found 45-year-old multi-decade resistance box. So this is a piece of test equipment that can be used during the prototyping of electronic circuits to substitute the interchange of different values. So basically it's like a debugging tool. Now, in case you missed it, the FBI were the first on the scene, and John G. Trump was there to snatch up all of his technology. They basically broke into his safe. That's why much of his estate is still tied up and much of his work is still classified. Now, let's have a look here, because it's really incredible that this isn't taught to us more often in our history books. It's something that kind of defies belief a little bit, just a smidge. Now, as mentioned, the technology that Trump really wanted to get his hands on, here's good old John Trump. Let's keep him up on screen for a smidge or two. Good old John Trump. He was working very, very closely with Vannevar Bush. Now, Vannevar Bush is the main scientist that was able to put together all the resources that America had at the time and apply them to military projects. So he was basically coordinating the laboratories, the academic institutions, government, and the military, and putting whoever needed to know in the know, and making sure who didn't need to know was completely in the dark about all these things. This is often where some of the special access programs come from. So you can see that it's very odd that they're the ones that come forward and say to us, oh, well, you know, his work is all of a philosophical nature and it's all speculative and, you know, it's just promotional. They're basically trying to throw you off the track there, even though Nikola Tesla's technology still stands the test of time and is used today. Now, part of this National Defense Research Committee, as I said, were the people that, through Harry Truman, created the Manhattan Project, the research and development for the atomic bomb. So these are very high-level people. Now, I've made this mistake before thinking that Vannevar Bush is related to the current political Bush family, but the Trump in this instance, good old John J. Trump, he is related to the current Trump of today. Good old Trump of today has spoken about him quite a few times. So, as I said, he's the protege of this man here, Vannevar Bush, and together they form what I believe is the core of not only the missile ballistic system, but all the UFO technology that they then discover as they start putting aircraft and missiles up higher and higher, and their sensors become more powerful with radars, and their technology becomes more exotic as they try and penetrate the oceans looking for submarines. So the science is the key that unlocks the UFO file. And this is why this disclosure that's just come out now is such a sham. Rush and Louis Elizondo coming forward, you know, they giving us a lot of talk, but very few of them are actually bringing forward technologies that are claimed in their cases, always behind closed doors or in a SCIF, or, you know, the SCIF is a secured compartmentalized information environments that they, you know, some place that's highly secured network systems, but it's all a sham. You know, Tesla's technology, if that was released, I think would change the world straight in and of itself. This is why I think when he passed away, and this information then turns to Vannevar Bush and John Trump, and that goes into the remember, Vannevar Bush was earmarked as one of the people of MJ-12, which is the core of the UFO file and the secret space program the United States had. So we can now jump straight into the militarization of Tesla's technology, because we now see what he was working on. What Trump was telling us was just this, and this, and this. We now begin to find remnants of it even today. And what's really, really crazy is, you know, Trump has said a few times how great and knowledgeable and amazing his uncle was and invented all these incredible things and knows about all this incredible technology. And you will see continuously that they're talking about this disclosure business and the technology. Curing cancer was Biden's one. But this technology is apparently there, and that's really what we should be pushing for as primary proof that, things really can move humanity forward. So I want to finish up a few things here, because now we're moving into the military aspect. Now we see the gloves beginning to come off, because remember, Tesla's patents can do all kinds of things. At the Tesla Museum or in his patents, you'll see there's all kinds of things to create a fireball lightning, which is a kind of ionized plasma. Ball lightning lasts very, very short amount of time. It's always in the upper atmosphere, but he could produce the effects on Earth in laboratories. Let me pull up an article here. So this is the In Search of Fireball Lightning. And these are people that follow on his experiments and his patents, trying to really understand physics in a different way. And you can see more like an explosion than ball lightning to me. But this goes quite far to explain how this forms also the foundation of radio electronics, using oscillators and amplifiers and all kinds of things. This all comes from Colorado Springs and his work that he did there. Now, you must also remember that whilst he was there, Tesla claimed that he was picking up signals from, he wasn't sure what, something close orbiting the planet, and at times he even claimed he was picking up signals from Mars. He announced this to the papers, that he had picked up a repeating signal that wasn't natural. And what did the signal say? Well, it said 1, 2, 3, 1, 3. It just kept repeating. And, nature doesn't do that through the kind of electronic waves that Tesla was very adept with. He even announced it to the papers, so take that for what you will. But it gets a little bit deeper here, because, as I mentioned, the way that Tesla understood the technology and the way it developed at Colorado Springs, the part of it that was highly, highly weaponized was, of course, the technology relating to rotating magnetic waves. These things form what they call scalar phenomena. Now, we see examples of this in the very deep projects of things like the Philadelphia experiment. I've mentioned this quote before by Vannevar Bush in 1967, just before he passed away, but he was quoted saying, "Can we learn to think in 4 dimensions? This and negative time, involving dreaming of the wildest sort, with no support whatsoever as yet from anything we see on record on our delicate instruments." So, can we dream outside of what we cannot detect with our instruments? And this is something that we've started with and has always been a deep focus of Tesla. And that's why many people who are involved or were involved with the Philadelphia experiment always point to Tesla and his technology. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with this, now the Philadelphia experiment is apparently this ship that was equipped with mega electrical coils, and they were trying to cloak the thing, and instead something else happened. Now, what, we don't know, but sailors were hurt, and it's always been cast aside as vast conspiracy theory, but there's a lot of little leads that keep bringing us back to the Philadelphia experiment, because we discover, for example, that they were looking at the spinning egg of Columbus of Tesla, and through this they produced large displays of rectangular helixes and hull-shaped devices that could detect U-boats underwater. Now, when we think about U-boats underwater, immediately my mind jumps to good old Townsend Brown. Townsend Brown. This gentleman here, also an absolute scientific genius, he writes about gravitational waves in 1942 already. Now, this might be in an unpublished document, Part 2, Structure of Space, dated 1942. Townsend Brown outlines a theory of a structure of space representing an interpretation of experimental observations. He theorizes that gravity is a fundamental effect caused by variations in the permittivity and the permeability of space, is a theory based on a foundation of electromagnetic properties. Now, this was important at the time of fighting in World War II because U-boats were a major problem. Basically, these were submersible ships, were able to attack at will. They were very difficult to detect. All they had at the time on a large scale was sonar, which wasn't always so effective. So they needed to develop more exotic technologies to discover how these ships could be detected. And again, if you're using particle-like understanding, then the physics becomes very difficult. You have to move things through water, which is very dense, and it needs to bounce back, and you have to get some kind of a reading. Whereas Tesla's technology was completely different, and Townsend Brown also had a similar view, and both were highly involved in the concept of life from other planets and information coming from deep within our ability to transport our minds across the physical. So quite remarkable work. Now, in this Philadelphia experiment, as I mentioned, Hilbert was involved, Einstein was involved, von Neumann, Vannevar Bush, of course. The technology really, more than anything, found a military application in ways that was not only directed energy, but had other fundamental effects on gravity and possibly time. So, incredible conjecture, but the fact is that we are still studying the effects of these kinds of things through things like torsion. Here we go. Let's see if I can bring some of this stuff up here. So these are the things that come out of Tesla's technology. Number one, standing wave. Now, standing waves are basically a form of scalar wave. They are different because they have an incredible application in that they, imagine it this way. I've kind of used this analogy to describe. Instead of firing particles like golf balls across the golf field, imagine instead if you had a rope. Okay, so let's picture that you had a friend at the end of the golf course and you were trying to hit him with a ball or something. Your golf ball, if you hit it, would have to travel across the air, and hopefully you on target and it pops him on the on the noggin, headshot. But on a transverse wave, if he was holding a rope, the moment you pull the rope, you immediately affect him. There's no time. The points are already linked in a certain way. So, that's super fascinating in terms of the technologies that come out of that. Now, when we go back to the UFO file, we see that the scalar capabilities that these longitudinal waves have is possibly what allows us to not only detect, but shoot down things in the air. You can see this with Tesla's technology. If I can pull up Ah, yes, right out of the CIA library. So as I mentioned, this is the Star Wars now, the Bohm-Aronov effect, scalar interferometry. This is the key word you want to use here. Scalar interferometry is basically scalar weaponry, right? Standing waves that have this instantaneous quantum effect, high energy, pinpoint, and see here, anything specific. So, this Bohm-Aronov effect is basically, again, looking at scalar waves. Now, these guys sometimes refer to it as a cold explosion because it's a pinpoint. It's a pinpoint. I don't want to call it a beam of energy, but it is a manifestation of energy at a certain point. And I'll show you a little bit how that works. So here we go. The Bohm-Aronov effect affects even gauge theory. So that's tensors and all kinds of things that have like phase factors to them. But the full weapon implications of the Bohm-Aronov discovery have not yet penetrated the minds and consciousness of Western physicists, electrical engineers, and weapon analysts. Even Feynman states this succinctly. It is interesting that something like this can be around for 30 years, but because of certain prejudices of what it is and is not, it significantly continues to be ignored. And so basically, scalar electromagnetics is the quantum mechanical effect where you can have influences that are accomplished by electrical and magnetic scalar potentials, even in the absence of electrical and magnetic fields, or in other words, things that can occur even otherwise in even otherwise zero electric and zero magnetic field regions. So in other words, it just is, in quantum terms, it's called non-local. It doesn't need to travel between a point and a point. It just appears there. And so here, you know, there's quite a lot of deep physics that the CIA have had in their vaults since 2003, talking about scalar waves. Again, this is a document done in 1984, if I remember. Yeah, 1984. And they say here, by changing the potentials while keeping the force field zero, one can directly produce energy at a distance. And if it were transported through space without loss, even though no energy transmission through space in the normal fashion occurs as such, indeed, it may be possible to utilize pure potential wave to transport the energy at any velocity, not limited even to the speed of speed of light, my apologies. So again, this is some of the technology that can go faster than light in a certain sense. We discover from people like Stephen Greer that the technology that they have in the Antarctic Circle, this is the military of the United States, basically uses this incredible system of little cubes. It's basically called a cube system. And these interferometers, not only, you know, what he says is we tell the public that they are just receivers that pick up these gamma waves and neutrinos or whatever they detect. But he also claims that, well, his the witness that came forward, first-hand account, and you know, gave testimony. He said that these devices are also able to transmit, and that means that they're also a defense system with scalar capability. I'll show you that video in just a moment here. But basically, he says, in the real world, one would be phase locking two beams, a fast and a slow beam, carrying narrow bandwidth. And how much zero field beam is obtained at the center of the bandwidth would depend on the sharpness of each beam. It could first be transmitted through a Faraday shield and blah, blah, blah. They explain it here, and they basically give you a little drawing. But this is what they envisioned. This is a Tesla invention right here. You have a massive, massive Tesla coil generator, and then erroneously here they're showing you the transmitter firing this beam, but again, it's not a beam of particles describe. It's more like that rope idea, already snapping something in the universe itself. Now, the thing is, you can detect this, and so he describes how this was detectable by the Russians. And according to the bomb Aronov effect, if two zero-field scalar beams are crossed in a distant region, real physical effects exist in that distant interference zone. This can be comprehended by realizing that energy at the transmitter sites is transformed into stress energy of a vacuum, i.e. pure potential, and it is the potential variation that is accomplished, and not the transmission of energy through space per se. We stress that locked-in or infolded vacuum energy in a potential vector and energy in transition are two quite different aspects of the same thing, just as energy and mass are two different aspects of one thing. And if you go one step deeper, energy and information are related. Information and consciousness are related. Consciousness and creation are related. This is the great lesson that Tesla followed to much of his understanding that allowed him to go forward. So basically, this document also says that you can control these things. Now look at this picture here. Here you see an airplane, but imagine if this was just, like a little UFO. The scalar beam is an instantaneous shot at a point. This is how you're able to shoot something going at 20 times the speed of sound. So again, this technology goes back to Tesla, and again, the Soviets have showed evidence of using a similar kind of thing, and even maybe being able to harness information, energy, which are interchangeable in a certain sense. But not only are you able to create energy at a certain point for peaceful or for weaponized uses, but you are able to draw energy at a distance, Tesla claimed. And so this is quite amazing information. And the Soviets engaged in weaponizing scalar electromagnetics for nearly 3 decades, as evidenced by Khrushchev's eerie 1960 announcement. And here it is here. He says, "We have a new weapon just within the portfolio of our scientists, so powerful that, if unrestrainedly used, it could wipe out all life on Earth." And remember, guys, the Russians here, not the kind of all the people in the world, when the Russians say something, you must know that they mean what they say. They're not ones to beat around the bush very, very much. Very serious people, generally speaking. Now, you remember that saying was actually, I'll mention it here, that in the 1975 proposal that Brezhnev made, he said, so this is in the SALT talks, this is now when the United States and the Soviet Unions are trying to reduce their nuclear weapon capabilities as they march to the doomsday of nuclear annihilation. They're trying to now control the weapons and arms race. And here, on June 13th, 1975, the Soviets urged the US to agree on a ban of research and development of not only intercontinental medium-range ballistic missiles, but new kinds of weapons more terrible than anything that the world has ever known. So, whatever that means, right? Now, even Ben Rich spoke about how consciousness and the manifestation of energy is non-localized. It exists everywhere across the universe. And this is where, someone like Tesla picks up the concept of the Akashic records. So basically, the deep mythology that Tesla followed is this. In a nutshell, this is the highly oversimplified version of his Eastern idea that brings us to this kind of heavy technology like scalar weaponry and such. But Tesla basically believed that, as the Vedic do, that there is prana. Prana is the creation force. It's what the Chinese might call qi. Prana is the essence of creation. It is the thing that can always and only ever exist. Everything comes from that. That is the machine of creation. And what's really interesting is that, you know, on the side of qi, the Chinese, and again, this has like scalar capabilities because they're talking about vibrational energies, and scalar waves being used in all kinds of technologies, even medical ones. That's not just like you know, crazy talk. Like literally there are transverse and longitudinal waves, and you can use either for different kinds of applications. So whilst, you know, you get what we would in the modern age call scalar waves that have these features like faster than light travel or apparent faster than light travel, you know, therefore a non-locality, so no space, this interaction with water and all kinds of things. It's very interesting. So that's why you can kind of also interpret this as qi, which they also think of as like a life force that kind of flows within us. It's kind of the vital energy of the body. So traditional Chinese medicine has this as a very central point. And, you know, qi, this prana, this life essence, has, being a part of creation, has access to creation, the Akash, the Akashic records. This is why when we say that Tesla would go into these trances or have this very powerful imagination and go into his mind and travel, he would be interacting with this information and come back with these incredible visions. And we've showed this in other story times, how incredible inventors and scientists have come forward with their best ideas in moments of strange meditation or sleep or some kind of conscious and unconscious state. Very, very fascinating. So, you know, again, this whole this whole concept of Nikola Tesla's mystic Eastern roots coming forward and helping him explain the nature of reality and consciousness and energy, it shows up very square and center in his inventions. And that's why when we look at people looking at these weapon systems, they keep referring Tesla, whether it's the Philadelphia experiment or directed energy weapons. It keeps going back to Tesla every single time. It's absolutely hilarious, you know. But also the same thing with free energy. You know, as I said, there's two sides of this energetic coin. If you use it well, it will serve you well. If you use it badly, you're going to use it for terrible destruction. So, you know, Tesla actually wrote in 1907, I've got a quote here from Man's Greatest Achievement. He says, "All perceptible matter comes from a primary substance, a prima materia." A prime matter, just like our podcast. So he says, this primary substance, or tenuity beyond conception, filling all space, I like to think of as the Akash, or the luminiferous ether. So the Akash, or the luminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or creative force, calls it into existence in a never-ending cycle of all things and phenomena. How beautiful is that? How beautiful is that? You know, these words come from the Upanishads, which are basically the Vedic texts, which shows you that Tesla has a deep link to this. So not only could the man do maths, but he had a very deep spiritual connection, and the two worked very closely hand in hand. This is, for me, what modern day science lacks. You know, in metaphysics, in philosophy, there are two types of parts of reality. There is the unity, or actually, let me go back to the two parts. On the level of the dualism, you've got ontology and epistemology. Ontology are the things you can measure. the things you can touch, the things that are physical, the things that science concerns itself with, modern day science, that is. But on the other side, you have epistemology. These are concepts, mathematics, forces, things that you can't easily point to. You can't say, this is love, this is creativity, or, this is the geometry of the universe in its essential archetype. What are you pointing to there? But the two are needed in order, they're both sides of the same coin. And this is why science is always coming short and not able to really understand, for example, the UAP reverse technology being a consciousness-based technology, or even understanding the unifying forces that make the universe what it is and gives us, at the end of the day, a grand unified theory in scientific study. So, Tesla's knowledge from the Vedas, I think, really helped him invent all these crazy things. X-rays, transistors, oscillators. Some even say like cryogenic engineering and all this great stuff. And that's great. But remember that with all these fantastic technologies that Tesla envisioned for us, unfortunately, the problem is that all of this got stolen, put into dark projects. And there's where the deep state wants to turn this beautiful vision and philosophy into a terrible nightmare for us that is there to control us and destroy things. And I think that this is really something that led to what made Tesla so depressed and withdrawn from society towards the end of his life. When it was quite amazing. There's a story that Tesla tells a reporter called O'Neill. O'Neill was kind of wondering, like, Tesla, what is your fascination with the pigeons in the park? Like, what is it with the birds, And Tesla says to him that, basically I've been feeding the birds in the park for decades, but there was one pigeon, a very beautiful, and it was pure white, and it had beautiful gray tips on its wings, and it stood out to me. It was different to me. It spoke to me. And every time I called her, it would come, and, he just absolutely, he said he loved that pigeon like a man loves a woman, and she loved me, he said. But then he says that one night he's lying in bed, he's problem solving, he's going through his things, and the bird comes through the window and kind of cooed, and he immediately knew he was calling Tesla. So he goes to the bird. It's like the bird has something important for me. And the moment he saw the bird, she communicated to him that the bird was dying. And then as the bird communicated that she was dying, and Tesla got the message, he says he saw a great light from her eyes, powerful beams, and then that those, how did he describe it? He said those, it was a light more powerful than anything he had ever produced in his laboratory, and it was extinguished. And when that pigeon died, something died in him. And he knew that when his time was up, that is when he would complete his work. That's when his work would be finished. He could only just be ambitious with his time. And, in his time, he gave us the Tesla transformer, the magnifying transmitter, and the wireless system. These three things together were supposed to form that world wireless system. And all of this came from deep experiences that Tesla's had in a spiritual and psychological sense. There's something quite miraculous to how this information came to Tesla and these experiences that led him to such amazing things, And, as I mentioned, Tesla thought he told humanity about intelligence orbiting the planet and possibly on Mars, and he was trying to like communicate these things, and you can completely see why the militaries used his technology but completely discredited him, because when he was supposed to win the Nobel Prize with Edison, he rejected it. He was like, no, Edison didn't invent jack shit. He's like, there's a difference between invention and discovery, and Edison's taken quite a lot of my thinking, and he's actually caused me a lot of harm. I would take him to court if I could. And so because he didn't accept it, they just gave it to a Swiss guy that year. I'm sure much to Edison's chagrin. But Nikola Tesla was a man of principle, and a man that understood a much higher reality. Here are some of my quotes, my favorite quotes from Tesla. He says, in 1899, turn of the 20th century, he says, we are getting messages from the clouds 100 miles away, possibly many times that distance. Do not leak it to the reporters. He also then, the next year, said, my measurements and calculations have shown that it is perfectly predictable to produce on our globe, by use of these principles, an electrical movement of such magnitude that without the slightest of doubt, its effects will be perceptible on some of our nearer planets. Venus and Mars will definitely know. Thus, from the mere possibility, interplanetary communication will definitely enter a new stage of probability. Saying his technology couldn't reach Venus and Mars, interplanetary communication. This is 123 years ago. Then he says in 1901, movements on instruments repeated many times concludes it to be a message from another planet, and that was in a newspaper interview. Same year, he says, I did not state that I had obtained messages from Mars, I only expressed my conviction that the disturbances that I obtained were of planetary origin. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I had been the first to hear the greetings of one planet to another. So he says that maybe he was actually hearing the planet itself, and that things like a planet might even have some kind of consciousness. I refer to the strange electrical disturbances, the discovery which I announced 6 years ago. At the time, I was only certain that they were of planetary origin. Now, in 1907, after mature thought and study, I've come to the positive conclusion that they must emanate from Mars. So now in 1907, he's been studying this for about 6 years, thinking, yes, to be sure, he says, we have no absolute proof that Mars is inhabited. Personally, I base my faith on the feeble planetary electrical disturbances which I discovered in 1989, and which, according to my investigations, could have originated from the Sun or the Moon or Venus. But further study has satisfied me that they must have emanated specifically from Mars. So he's saying that although these things could have come from these other places, I've been checking since 1899, definitely Mars. Interesting that Elon wants to go there, right? So he then says, again, speaking about Mars, I came to the conclusion that Mars was sufficient to exert a noticeable influence on a delicate receiver of the kind I was perfecting, which means that he was able to put interstellar communication between us and Mars. Now we send signals to the moon and they take sort of a few minutes to bounce back to us. But Tesla says, the arrangement of my receiving apparatus and the character of its disturbances recorded preclude the possibility of there being a terrestrial origin, and I also eliminated the influence of the Sun, the Moon, and Venus. As I announced, the signals consisted in a regular repetition of numbers, and subsequently, that study convinced me that they must have emanated from Mars, this planet, something that have been just then close to the Earth. So you can see that over time he's still checking. This is like 1921 now. He's convinced that something is repeating from Mars, but it could also be something close to the Earth. Now, this is around the time when we start to discover the Black Knight satellites. Okay? So let me pull that up on screen for you, because when he was saying that Marconi and Tesla were picking up this the satellite long before we were able to even launch anything in space in a polar orbit. So, there's some really great photos from the STS shuttle. Fantastic HD. Now, obviously, Wikipedia will call this conspiracy theory, but it's a very interesting one. Hasn't been easily solved. Yeah, well, that's not it there, but these are the frames. This was picked up in modern times, but we've been studying it for forever. Not forever, but for at least as long as since Tesla was one of the few to be able to try and decode its signals and such. And so in eventually 1935, he said, whilst experimenting with wireless receiver of extraordinary sensitivity, I detected faint signals from Mars, our brother planet. Could not interpret the signals, but they seemed to suggest a numerical code. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, there was a 4 at the end. So this was in 1935. And basically what Tesla's hinting again there is that he's picking up something that is natural but not quite. It needs understanding. It needs exploration. And I think he had the right kind of mindset to be able to deal with these fascinating changes that they would have on our society. We see that from these other studies done by, whether it's the Vatican or the military, they think that we're too childish to handle vast, sweeping changes to the truth of our narratives, and that it will lead to the loss of control by them, and they claim it will lead to complete societal collapse. But really what they're worried about is the control that they lose. So that's the big thing that they're really afraid of. And one thing I just want to finish here with, or begin to start to wrap up the whole story for this episode, is this thing that there's some parts of the government that do want this technology to come out. We mentioned John J. Trump, the great uncle of Donald Trump. The Trump family must know about this kind of technology. They are so deeply involved, or have been deeply involved, in the highest levels of scientific classified endeavor. And they were first on the scene to Tesla's safe when he passed away. Now, some of them have tried over the years to bring this information forward. One of the reasons that we looked at the Kennedy assassination was simply because we know that E. Howard Hunt confessed to Caddy that essentially JFK had been assassinated because of his deep links to the UFO technology and information, and him wanting to share that with the Russians to avoid a nuclear war and possibly make a joint space program, stopping the Cold War in its tracks and trying to be collaborative and diplomatic, all the things that a military-industrial complex and a runaway CIA does not want. So remember, Douglas Caddy is famous because he was the one that represented the Watergate burglars, and it's again funny because the CIA call the Watergate burglars the plumbers, and plumbers are their code word for the operatives they send into foreign nations to go create coups. So anyways, this was a coup within the American state that led to the Watergate scandal, and so Caddy was he was the one that was representing people like Gordon Liddy and the others. So there's this deep tie with the aerospace and the intelligence agencies in things like assassinations of people who want to release the technology. and bring it forward. People go flying out of windows and their cars explode and all kinds of wonderful things. You know, even military personnel who have come forward with some of this information have just been found lying lifeless in the middle of the desert. So you can see that there is a strong facet of the military industrial complex, the hydra of the deep state, that tries to keep this information highly suppressed. And that's why you see so much counterintelligence, and that's why now we are still not getting real disclosure, because real disclosure means that they have to come forward with the technology and they have to come clean about all the terrible things that they've done to try and hide it. And I mean terrible things. I can, if you think JFK was the most shocking thing that the CIA could have been involved in, then, you know, got a lot more to kind of bring to your attention as we kind of go forward. Now, let's start to put a bit of a bow on this, because really, as I said, Tesla is front and center in this episode here, and his battle with this vision for the progress of humanity has been completely tarnished by the deep state actors. And whilst he had a supreme knowledge of the very affecting properties, or the very things that affect the properties of nature, that information has never come to the public. It's just completely been hidden behind all kinds of barriers and smoke and mirror. Now, some of the people, as I mentioned, in the political world and in the scientific world, we call them perhaps white hats, people that are aware of the technology and can't understand why we're not bringing forward the industrial revolution that would come with it. Obviously, they don't understand the deep lies and crimes that the Hydra has committed, so that's why we're not getting the technology. But every now and again, someone does try to come forward. Now, one of these people, one of the presidents that was renowned in many circles of people who have done UFO research and such, one of the presidents that was renowned for wanting to come forward with the technology, but unfortunately political scandals stopped him, was Nixon. Now, obviously, Nixon was discredited as a president. He was resigned and then eventually pardoned. But he was using intelligence services to basically cook American politics. You know, so when today political rivals in America say, "Oh, you're using the deep state and the FBI and this and this and this to kind of try me, indict me, or, you know, put me in jail," there might definitely be some truth, because there's definitely some precedence to it. Now, what's interesting about Nixon, for all of his faults, and as I said, I don't like him one bit, but we see clear signs that he was read into the UFO file, but could not come out with it publicly because of his disgrace, politically speaking. So we learn from Caddy that good old Nixon hid a time capsule. He hid a time capsule in the White House, and he also then he basically taped a copy to Robert Merritt and tried to get a copy of it to Kissinger. Now, if you want more information on this, I highly recommend you guys go check out Daniel Lists at The Dark Journalist. Let me put his links. There you go. I mean, he really is an expert in deep dives on this matter here. And his interviews are just of the people that have the highest caliber. Highly recommend it. But basically, just to go back to the time capsule story that he sort of tells, is that basically Nixon develops this trust with Merritt, and he's an merits this undercover operative, an ultra secret Houston plan program covert intelligence operative, right? I mean, he was a covert agent and a sex operative because compromising material was his thing. And I mean, think Jeffrey Epstein, deep undercover type business. This is the kind of people that blackmail senators and other Congress people and politicians and businessmen to, advance the agenda of the CIA, not of the American people, but of the intelligence community. So, in a twist, basically, Paddy gets a copy of this letter, the third copy, and has said that he has passed it on to the National Archives, so that when Nixon placed it in 1972, and in it put all the information that he wanted to come forward with relating to the UFO file, he could, although he was discredited at the time when they dug up the time capsule, he could be seen in history as the president that tried to maybe bring this information forward. So, make of that what you will, but there's quite a lot of very, very fascinating links to this concept, because as I said, it links in JFK and the UFO file and his assassination and the work with the Russians. And we looked at how Tesla was developing scalar weapons that were being repeated in Russia as well. So there's this matching of technologies and a race for not just missile systems and nukes, but things that go way beyond. And presidents like Nixon knew about this. Obama, Bush, Trump, they knew about this. Now, if I told you that there was a link between Trump and Nixon, would you believe me? Well, believe it or not, both of them have been around and their histories have overlapped. And in fact, I discover from Daniel lists that the Trump received a letter, or many letters from Nixon, and in one of the letters, for example, Trump expresses admiration for Nixon and says, "You're a great man, and I have and always will have the utmost respect and admiration, and I'm proud to know you." And he tried to get the Nixon family into Trump Towers, and also said it would be one of my greatest ambitions to have the Nixons as the residents in Trump Tower, and so on and so forth. But in some of these other letters, he said to Trump, from the whispers from his wife, he said, you should run for president. And Trump's spoken about it a few times. Here's, like, for example, a Politico article published by the Associated Press. And you can see Trump and Nixon were pen pals in the 80s. And, about their letters and such like that. But he basically says that I really think you should run. I think you should run for president one day, and if you did, I think you would win. There's also a very great chat that George Noory has on Coast to Coast about Nixon's ET time capsule, because again, the technology is what he put in there that he was trying to get out, and a lot of that technology was based on things that Nikola Tesla organically already had brought forward to us. And he was already talking like the kind of disclosure people, but he had scientific credibility at least. So that here we go. This is from the Associated Press, and you can see this is talking about the exhibit, the national exhibit that they've got there. And you can read here, Nixon chimes in, "Let me be so presumptuous," he says in his letter, "to offer a little free advice, which is worth, incidentally, exactly what it costs." Nixon writes to Trump, Trump should handle the New Jersey Generals football team, and Nixon included plenty of shout-outs
and underappreciated lineman in his quotes. From his part, says, one of my great ambitions is to have the Nixons at the Trump Tower. Where's the quotes I'm looking for? So here's another interesting one in 1990. Dear Donald, I know nothing about the intricacies of your business, but the massive media attack on you puts me in your corner. So you can see that they had quite a lot of great support. There we go. So Trump, in his usual self-congratulatory stamp on the exchanges, said shortly after the 2016 election that he didn't really know Nixon, but Nixon would write me letters. It was very interesting. He would always want me to run for office. So you can see there that both of these presidents are aware of the UFO file, 100%. And a lot of them are familiar that this technology, even if you're, again, leaving out the off-world side, there is the deep Tesla technology that went dark after his death. And even that could transform the world just as much as acknowledging that there's extraterrestrial life in other parts of the world. So, you know, that's absolutely extraordinary to kind of keep in mind. Now, the fact that some presidents know about this and have tried to, and maybe in the future, maybe RFK or Trump will still bring this forward because both families are aware of the advanced technology. I'm absolutely convinced with that. So while some of them might be white hat folk that want to bring the technology forward to help humanity, there are others that obviously want to suppress this, keep it for themselves, and just benefit at the expense of humanity and the poor. It's as simple as that. It's absolutely disgusting. So this is why the weaponization of this technology is really where we lose our ability to really get into the meat, you know. And you know, if you don't believe me on the Nixon thing, I was just scrolling here and I see this. It's very interesting. I didn't know that Snopes had a look at this. Did Nixon hide proof of an alien life in a time capsule? The result? Unproven. So yeah, I'm surprised they didn't say false, but no, it's unproven according to them. So I thought that was fascinating. And again, this goes to shows that whether it's Bill Clinton or Truman or Trump or Eisenhower, all of them had some kind of awareness of majestic activities, that is the UFO file. And you know, that's why I think Trump can make these huge statements like, oh, you know, if you vote for me, we'll change the world. He never did, but I mean, he was completely, and still is, in the throes of a complete witch hunt. Now, why I want to mention this as well is, you know, Tesla technology is basically about directed energy, not in terms of a beam or a wave propagating through a medium, but pinpoint directed energy. It's not the kind of stuff that we use today, but obviously what's public to us is the toy version, you know. And you get this in forms of, they call them access denial, or active denial systems. I want to mention these active denial systems as we begin to wrap up episode 23 of Storytime here, because the stuff is scary, you know. Right now, they here, for example, is a group of people. This is actually quite funny. So this is a group of people that basically are doing a little show and dance from the military, right? And it's showing how this can be used to it can be used to do crowd control and any adversaries, how to like basically put them down in a non-lethal way. This is straight from YouTube, from Wikipedia. Let me just make sure you can hear this. Excellent. So this is just a demonstration.
DoD representatives had quite the heated demonstration at Quantico, Virginia from the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate.
This is a military area. Move away from the perimeter. I say again, this is a military area. Move away from the perimeter.
Their new active denial system boasts a reach far beyond any other non-lethal system.
Well, it's a versatile system, and it has a range of non-lethal capability that we can't even come close to with any of our fielded systems today that are in our military forces.
About 7 football fields to give it some perspective. It can deter individuals on a military perimeter all the way up to a riotous crowd, all without permanent harm.
It only penetrates 1/64 of an inch of your skin, goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are.
And there you go, and they scatter like rats.
And there's no permanent injury caused by it. Very safe system. We've built in some safety margins and training for the operators.
They even let any of the guests volunteer to test out its effectiveness and safety, including the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
It is something that, once again, probably the safest system that we've developed as far as the non-lethal capability.
From Washington, I'm Sergeant Andrew Milner.
Non-lethal capability. So these are the LRADs and HRADs and various other ones. Absolutely monstrous electrical devices that penetrate your skin very, very thinly, so it's not lethal to you, but causes you extreme pain. And now these people here, I mean, you can see they all like smiling, and even when they get a little blast of energy, you can see they're not smiling so much, but one or two of them are brave enough to sort of see this dude in the middle there that kind of chills. But they run quickly because it's a terrible feeling, and you can see that this is at a decent distance. Now they wanted to deploy this as some kind of like a suppression field for crowd control and directed energy weapons at the highest level. So this is a Raytheon system. And it's called Silent Guardian, and it's an active denial system. The military version destroys things, absolutely annihilates them, whether it's a drone or a missile or anything like that. I mean, it is it's just incredible. This, for example, is from it's very funny, but it's from the US Government Accountability Office. Who would have thought we'd go to the Accountability Office to see directed energy weapons? So just have a peek at what you kind of see here. Now let me just again make sure that I'm not blasting your eardrums.
Defense spends about $1 billion annually developing directed energy weapons, such as high-energy lasers and high-powered microwaves. These weapons can disrupt or destroy their targets at the speed of light.
Okay, now, notice that the one that the civilians were blasted with, that was not at the speed of light. That was a pulse of directed, heated radiation, basically. It's this one, on the other hand, is scalar. It is a point source explosion. It's, as he says, at the speed of light.
For example, DoD has developed high-energy lasers that have successfully shot down drones, but speed isn't their only advantage. They're also less expensive per use than traditional weapons like guns and missiles. Despite those potential advantages, DoD has had trouble getting these technologies out of the lab and into service. The Army has developed a detailed transition plan to support.
So he says, we've had trouble getting these into service. Why? Because the legalities and moral problems, and again, secrecy. It's a bit of an issue. They don't want to bring a lot of this information forward to the public because it's absolutely terrifying.
Moving these weapons into the next stages of development. We recommended that the Navy and the Air Force develop similar plans.
That's right. Just stick it on an airplane, and then, or a satellite, then you can really kick some ass from the sky. So this is the problem, is that technology like that of Tesla's can be used positively, or it can be used for things that are nefarious, And, many people, for example, think of the High Atmospheric Auroral Program, HAARP, as one of the prime examples of this. Something that is scientific. It can be used as radio telemetry to, do studies of the ionosphere and the upper atmosphere and electromagnetic phenomena and things like that. But at the same time, it can also be used as an incredible weapon, they claim. And many countries have claimed that this causes earthquakes. It causes rainstorms. You can modify weather with systems like HAARP. That's why it's so deep in the conspiracy theory annals. So this is the wiki article here, just to give you guys a quick peek. The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program is now under the auspices of the Alaska Fairbanks University, and I believe that's swapped over in 2014, 2015. Yeah, and you see they're trying to shut down the facility, and instead they turn it over to to the university. So it's an antenna array, and although it claims it's doing high atmospheric research, very low frequency research as well, which is also disconcerting because our brains operate at a very low frequency of about 6 to 8 hertz, and ultra low frequencies like that can affect maybe humans or other life forms. So artificial air glow. We've talked about dancing plasma, how that can be used as glowing lights in the sky that might seem like alien things. Remote sensing of heated ionosphere, a whole bunch of things. And conspiracy theories. Allegations include, and this is US Senator Mark Beglich, his son. Actually, both of these guys passed away, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just see. I think, no, sorry, he's my apologies. Seems the man is still. I think it was his dad, Nick Beglich. Yeah. His body was never found. Yeah, there you go. Presumed to have died in a crash of a light aircraft in Alaska in 1972. He was the member of the Democratic Party. His father also claimed that HAARP was a secret program, So, and then obviously his son uses his father and writes this book called Angels Don't Play This HAARP, which actually I think I got a copy of. Anywho. He claimed that the HAARP facility could trigger earthquakes and turn the upper atmosphere into a giant lens so that the sky would literally appear to burn. Russian military journal wrote that the ionospheric testing would trigger or could trigger a cascade of electrons that could fill up the Earth's magnetic poles, creating magnetic interference and all kinds of problems. Alaska's state legislature and the European Parliament have had hearings about HAARP, the latter citing environmental concerns. That's the European Parliament. Also, former governor of Minnesota, ex-professional wrestler, Joseph Ventura. He questioned whether the government is using the site to manipulate weather or bombard people with mind-controlling radio waves. Remember the low-frequency experiments? And interestingly, an Air Force spokeswoman said Ventura made an official request to visit the research station but was rejected. And his crew showed up at HARP anyway and were denied access. So anyways, you can read about HARP. It's very interesting. But what is also super interesting is that one of the people that have recently come forward in the Stephen Greer press club events that he had, where he brought forward some of the incredible witnesses giving forward their testimony. This was in June 12th this year, you know. One of the guys that came forward, they claimed to work with Raytheon, and their facility is in the Antarctic. And let's just quickly listen to the gentleman's name is Eric Hecker. Let me pull this up for you guys here. And so, you know, a question is, where did HARP go? Good answer might be, well, here. Let's have a listen.
Array. He has an enormous amount of information, but in the interest of time, we'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Hecker.
Hello, everybody. Ladies, gentlemen, members of the press. I'm very happy that you're giving me this attention and this information attention because it needs to get out to the world. I will start, since we have to be brief. I have already given all pertinent information and supporting documentation to the Senate Intelligence Committee and AARO. They informed me that all of my information will be recorded for public record and shared with Congress. It is that important. In 2010, I was selected to go down to the South Pole Station in Antarctica for an entire year by Raytheon Polar Services as an employee of a third-party contractor for the National Science Foundation. I functioned in a dual-role capacity as a tradesman and a firefighter. My responsibilities required me to be more informed than most of my crew and offered me complete access to the facilities. What I learned from this unique experience needs to be shared with the entire world. The technology at the South Pole Station certainly can do what it is presented as its primary purposes, and unfortunately, much more. The IceCube neutrino detector is presented as a passive listening device for the purposes of the science as presented. But I'm going to skip right through the chase, folks. I have provided documentation that proves that the 5,160, what they call DOMs, that are embedded in the ice can actually transmit at 2,047 volts each. That gives us a long list of things to consider. It is effectively a multifaceted directed energy weapons platform that I will list rapidly a few things that it can do. Vehicle detection. We're learning that these off-world craft, on-world craft, ours or other nations, are also emitting neutrinos. So this makes the South Pole Station effectively an air traffic control station for this new level of equipment that nobody's discussing. In addition to the ability to detect neutrinos and the exotic vehicles, I have provided documentation that shows that this is also a system for faster than light communications. In the past, Gary McKinnon has hacked NASA, found the off-world fleet, the list of captains, and it's apparent that if we have faster-than-light vehicles moving throughout the system, we're going to need faster-than-light communications. This is that facility. Unfortunately, I have other bad news. The season that I was there, 2010 to 2011, we converted from construction to operations and maintenance in both the elevated station and the detector array. Unfortunately, when they first fired it up, that was when we had the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There was 2 incidental shots before they were able to target it correctly. This is an earthquake-generating device as well. This is the weapons of war that we have to deal with now and what Raytheon's hiding. There's an ELF system at the South Pole Station that when I arrived, I was told it was off, dismantled, and completely defunct. In my work, I will rapidly just tell you, I had to figure out the circuitry for certain other repairs, and I found that this system is in fact completely energized, up and running, and being utilized with the other systems for nefarious purposes as well. The Atmospheric Research Observatory is in what we call the clean air sector. I witnessed myself a very powerful green laser shooting out of the top of this facility into the cosmos. This, I believe, is a secondary form of long-range communications and or a defense system. I am not saying that we need to be scared of anything that's out there, but please understand the military-industrial complex is happy to invest all of your money in alleviating their fears. A question of power comes into play for all of these facilities that are present. I assure you, I knew what was going on, I knew the load demands of the facility, and all of these new items exceed the demand for the systems that I was presented. I'm doing due diligence and research. I believe there is either a secondary power supply there that is either nuclear, that was there prior to the start of the Antarctic Treaty, which prohibits such things, and or that there is some sort of exotic power supply system there that just is not in the verbiage of the treaty, so it negates the responsibility to the parties involved.
Okay, so put that in your pipe and smoke it. You know, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory here in the Antarctic, this guy is basically saying it is not a passive listening scientific research mechanism. It has advanced capabilities as an array. If you have lots of little, very powerful DOMs, I think he calls them. With an array, if you have one powerful, these days, a phased array is what we use for radio telescopes because they're much more powerful. Lots of little sensors spaced out, transmitter receivers, instead of one giant one. And so this array, although each one only emits a certain amount, it gives you an exponential kind of output. And he's claiming here that these people are performing illegal activities because the things that they have might fall outside of the language of international treaties. This is what these organizations do under military orders, basically, and funding. So I want to get to my final point. If you all have been with us this whole 2.5 hours, we're going to finish off on quite a controversial topic, something that's come up in the news of late. And I want to preface this just immediately with the disclaimer that I'm not saying that what happened recently in Hawaii is a directed energy weapon. I have no proof of that. But what was very interesting to me, super interesting to me, in fact, was that, I mean, just in February, just before we had the huge blow up of disclosure, let's call it that, just before the meeting of Avril Haines and everyone, look at this Hawaii News Now video here. Let's play this for you here, just a sec. Look what happened in Feb.
which helps, especially in a a cloud mass that's not really going to rain. It helps to bring rain and especially snow down.
So it works.
It does work marginally, but the problem with silver iodide through the years has been this, is that they feel it could be harmful to aquatic life. Okay. So over in Dubai, which is what you're seeing here, they took it a different step, and what they basically did, they had a fleet of drones that flew up into cloud cover, and they used electrical charges to force water droplets to combine into larger ones.
So not silver, not cloud seeding as we know.
No, they're not using the traditional silver iodide.
So isn't that amazing? That, things like satellites from space beaming down upon us are a real thing. And in this case here, instead of the satellites doing the heating up or the electrical discharging in the atmosphere, they're using drones in Dubai. Now, I must apologize there. Unfortunately, I was I was a little bit muted from our last video. It was a little bit loud. I just want to go back and quickly repeat just this very important point. The reason I'm pointing to these directed energy weapons, possibly from space, is to point out that we have a secret space program that we're not bringing forward, and that something like this is very real. So now, I'm not saying that this is what happened in Hawaii. The destruction there is really the thing that amazed me. The fact that many people jumped to this possibility is really an eye-opening concept. And so it's something that, knowing that it's real, we have to keep our minds open and the questions pointed in the right direction. And so, for example, this is just a small little clip from one of the crazy things that happened in Hawaii. This is straight from CNN, your bringer of news across the world.
When a nearby building caught fire, the family made a decision that likely saved their lives. They climbed over the seawall and into the ocean to escape the rushing flames.
My 12-year-old Kavika, brave kid, strong kid, did so good. He's like, I'll take this bag and I'll go swim with it in the water. You guys have to have the kids. So we jumped in the water. Waves started to come in and we're basically crashing into the rocks there. So we swam and tread water there, holding the kids.
So you can see, I mean, these scenes are just absolutely apocalyptic. Now, when you see some of the destruction from the air, one of the big reasons that people think that this is some kind of controversial effect, because wildfires happen all the time, and they might be increasing with some frequency, some say, due to perhaps, some say global warming, who knows, but wildfires happen. I mean, I come from South Africa where the veld is extremely dry. We have to burn it because we know that if we don't, the grass gets too tall and the fires go out of control. We do controlled burns, and so we don't get problems with wildfires destroying parts of the city. It's just, it's not great. It makes quite a lot of smoke, but in terms of safety, it's something that's known.
Staying in a hotel for the next...
Wildfires do happen. But now the problem is that where the conspiracy, I think, kicks off in Hawaii is when you look at the destruction, it looks like an atomic bomb dropped on the place. It's not something that you normally see when you have, wildfires. So let me give you a little example. In South Africa, we've had some really, really bad fires. And especially up in the Cape where it's very dry and they don't have access to a lot of water. It's been really, really bad, animals and people have lost their lives, So let me just see if I can point this out to you. Now remember, we've also had outbreaks in Greece, in Canada, Turkey, in Australia. As I said, fires are quite a devastating thing. Now, here is straight from the Western Cape government. This is one of the provinces here in South Africa. And, they put forward this video just to show us an example.
The next time one useful in getting information out to people very, very quickly, but also to make sure that you're getting it from reliable sources. And your house, that it's not covered in famous or stuff too close to the house, to clear your gutters. And it's always a good idea to keep your personal documents, those passport, ID, things like that, in a place where if you are asked to evacuate, you can just grab one pile and you can go. Particularly if there's some kind of pre-warning. So last night, Boys Drive, there was an idea that they're going to be able to evacuate, so people could.
So these are the guys doing the controlled burns. But, we had some historic buildings that burnt down. Here's the BBC reporting. So this is on Table Mountain in the Western Cape. And here you can see, this is the fire becomes uncontrollable. The material becomes so hot that the fire needs to just burn itself out. You can't sort of stop it. Now, I know that I'm not trying to compare the two directly, but I'm just trying to say that we, for example, even in South Africa, have seen homes and stores and huge swaths of land destroyed by fires. Many have, and it's a tragedy every time around. But now, when you instead go to the fires in Hawaii, the images sort of start to look like this. Okay, let's pull it up on screen. You can see it looks like, it looks like an entire it looks like what you see in Hiroshima in a certain sense. Everything's just sort of flattened and destroyed in ways that I've personally never seen. And I think many people in Hawaii have never seen, and this is where some of the controversy has started. Now, not only that, there's been, again, part of the conspiracy stuff goes also into the failed mismanagement of the emergency response from the government, the turning off of water and the denial of access and, just the fumbling disaster caused that led people straight into the, into the ocean to try and protect themselves. But the other crazy thing is that in some cases, a lot of these fires sort of seem to jump an entire house, or it goes right across a street or a beach. This is why the people were in the ocean. There was strong fires and strong winds, and the fire, some say that the sugar cane, the grass that had been put after the sugar cane could become very syrupy, and so that could be blown and clump, but it's just weird things I've just never seen in terms of fire in such a, it's a destruction that just breaks my heart. So this is where the massive sort of conspiracy stuff comes from, is just this devastation that you're seeing, and temperatures that just defy belief. Many residents are already asking questions. And as I said, the conspiracy is that it's now, it must be some kind of directed energy weapon. Why? Because, why would they do that? Oh, because BlackRock and Vanguard will come and buy up the land, and, there's, that is all for people to go and research and check themselves. But what I'm trying to say here is it so unbelievable? Maybe it didn't happen in Hawaii, but we're thinking about using this. We thought about using it in Iraq in 2017, against real humans. We'd blow them up with energy weapons, burn them. Not just the little crowd suppressing ones that just kind of like make you feel like you're in a microwave. No, these things would be lethal. So you can kind of imagine the technology that the governments have at their disposal. All of this comes from Tesla's, well, predominantly from people like Tesla, who were hoping that by this point here we'd be tapping into zero-point energy or quantum vacuum energy and freeing ourselves of nuclear and of petroleum-based energy sources. The Earth itself, he says, is a battery designed with more energy than we would ever need. And we don't need to fight each other for it. We don't need to keep secrets about the technology use and keep it from the public. Now, as I said, the tragedy in Hawaii, it really is a terrible thing, and our hearts go out to you. And I don't mean to instigate further by suggesting these kinds of things, but this is a message that has come to me from a lot of people on the ground there. So it's worth saying, because when we look at the possibility of these satellites in space with these capabilities, I mean, when you see SpaceX put up the Zuma CIA satellites, you know, maybe it is just for surveillance, but maybe like HARP or the Dom array in the Antarctic, it can have this dual-edge purpose with its technology. We need to be aware of these things. More than that, we need to really tap into the kind of essence of who Nikola Tesla was as a person. A great inventor, a great thinker, a great experiencer of the creative force of, you know, our essence. Just having that connection to something deeper gave him an incredible knowledge and ability to harness the best that he could be and bring to humanity things that light up our houses and power our internet and have completely changed the way we exist on this planet. And so over the last 100 years or so, we've been enjoying much of his technology, and even Elon Musk chose the Tesla logo T as one of the little arcs from an electrical engine as a little bit of a nod to Nikola Tesla. But we really do need to bring him into focus and all that he stood for, about bringing humanity off its knees and moving forward in the future in a positive direction, using technology in a responsible way, and not being shy to explore the great wonders that the universe allows us to tap into. I wonder what he would say today if he was still alive. It would be very interesting. I'm sure he would be greatly shocked that we are still so far behind. You know, he had great, ambitious desires for humanity to be, to have flying cars and infinite medical health and a great knowledge of the universe itself for insights and understanding, learning, and growing. So, you know, this is a crazy thing. And I know I've gone on and on about how Tesla saw the world very, very differently. And I've mentioned this podcast, it's not a podcast, I guess it's a YouTube channel, many times on StoryTime. And I'm going to show you why someone like Ken from Theoria Apophasis is such a gem of a human. I'm going to show you, we're going to end off with this final video where Ken from Theoria Apophasis is going to show you, with a little bit of an invention that he's made, what are the real principles of magnetism and space and the dielectric nature of the universe, as Tesla and Steinmetz and Heaviside and many of the other greats taught, and we've seemed to have forgotten with atomism from, you know, people like Einstein and the others. it's a great challenge to physics to explain the things that Ken can demonstrate. And again, someone like this great man has a very deep grounding in metaphysics, in linguistics of ancient Greek and Pali and all kinds of things, Sanskrit. He understands the concepts from the different ways that the human language has been able to grasp the concepts and bring them to the understanding of mankind. So I think it's going to be a really great closer, and you'll get to see Ken perform with his ferrocell. So it's a little bit of a creation that he's made. He's got these very powerful magnets, and basically he puts a ferromagnetic fluid on top of them in a way that it creates a bit of a hologram. Like when you bend your credit card or something and you get like that depth perception in it, you see a bit of a 3D kind of thing with this video. So you're going to have to maybe look a little bit carefully. Let me bring it up on screen for you and then we'll close off. So there'll be quite a few concepts here that might not be apparent to you straight off the bat, and I'm going to jump around a bit, but I just want you to kind of see a little bit of the magnetic effects that he's able to show you here. And I mean, in this first image, the first thing I'm going to just say is that what he's got here is that lens of ferrofluid over a very powerful supercell. A supercell is a very powerful magnet. I think it's a neodymium. What I want you to note there immediately is the flower of life. For those of you that are aware of sacred geometry, isn't that a interesting thing? And that, what you're looking at, is the inside of a torus. It's the inside of a donut. When he starts to move it just a little bit, you'll see that these arms are making a tube-like closed donut. And it's just absolutely fascinating to be seeing the universe as it is. It's way more immersive and visually useful as a tool to view things in terms of magnetism this way than maybe, putting a few iron filings on a piece of paper at school with a magnet underneath to see the North and South Pole. This explains things much, much deeper and is linked to the metaphysical essence of our link to creation itself. Let's listen into what Ken has to say.
Okay, I promise to show you something now that I've never talked about before, and that will be in the 4th edition of my free book, not selling anything, Uncovering the Missing Secrets of Magnetism. Okay, right now we're looking at a magnet underneath the ferrocell, invented by my buddy, Tim. And here you can see, moving clockwise, brighter lines. These are just fed by standard hardware LEDs. Okay. Now underneath that, moving in a seemingly opposite direction, or counterclockwise, you will see dimmer lines. The dimmer lines is the opposite face of the magnet that is furthest away from the surface of the ferrocell. The ferrocell are two perfectly optically flat pieces of glass, in between which is a special solution that is less than 1 micron thin. If you're actually to have this ferrocell in your possession, you would actually see holographic depth far deeper than any hologram, even the best art hologram that the world has ever seen. And this is less than 1 micron thin. But that's not what I'm talking about here. Let's first take a look at what we're looking at, then understand what we're looking at. Because descriptions are one thing, explanations are another. So, here you see it. Clockwise brighter lines and seemingly counterclockwise dimmer lines. So, what do the dimmer lines represent? Now, we hold the position that is irrefutable that there is a double vortex on either pole of a magnet. We think that one side is moving clockwise and the other side is moving counterclockwise, but that's a spatial vector. In reality, the truth is, and this is something I've already mentioned, I'll get to the main point here in a second. The truth is that both are moving in exactly the same direction. If you place your hands like this and move them opposite each other in a way, you'll say, well, they're moving inverse to each other. But if you look at each hand, you'll see that this one's moving counterclockwise, and on the other side, this one's moving counterclockwise. If you move them clockwise, they're also moving inversely. But if you look at each one, this hand's moving clockwise, and the other.
So let me just kind of explain it, because his hands are very dark. You can't really see it. What he's saying there is the torsional field is a flow. It you know, when you see this, it's kind of like, looks like the drain going down one direction, but you also get this effect sometimes with like the spinners on wheels or on car tires and stuff. It's actually going the opposite direction. In other words, he's saying that when you see this, if you look at the top, this top hand is going clockwise, and when you turn it over and you're doing this hand is also going clockwise. It's actually the same motion, even though at the toral point they look like they're in opposite. It's just torsion. It's a twist of the same thing flipped at an axial point. So let's just go back to the video quick.
Hands moving clockwise. So the vector of inverse movement is only a spatial vector. Both are in reality moving in the exact same direction. These curvilinear circles, okay, we need to understand something else. It is amazing, and this is the most fundamental principle of the universe, and yes, I don't care if it sounds hubristic or boastful, but I'm the first person on Earth to figure out what magnetism is, how magnetism works, and that it can exist no other way. Simplicity is divinity. If you want to talk about Occam's razor, the most simplest explanations must be the true ones. There is nothing possibly conceivable that is more simplex than this. Explaining it, however, is not simple. The explanation is not simple.
So I'm going to vouch for Ken here, and you know, I will leave you to his YouTube. As I said, it's Theoria Apophasis. It's excellent. You'll get the full explanation there. I'm going to jump through it here just a little bit in the interest of time. But he's absolutely correct.
I promise to show you.
It's Mother Nature is simplex. Obviously, the explanation is a little bit difficult because he's talking about the inertial plane, the dialectic circuit. He's basically saying that everything in the universe has a sort of balance. A force in motion is known as the inertial plane, is a counter space operator to, you know, I think it's I'm going to have to go back and watch the videos myself. I haven't gotten them all straight off hand. But the one thing I want to show you here is what happens when he puts a very powerful magnet towards the middle. Now, what's interesting about that is, again, we're talking about Tesla's work. We're talking about a knowledge of the way the universe is fabricated that is not this atomistic business that we're struggling with in physics today. I'm not saying that physics, all of it must be discredited, but there is a concept that we don't understand, and it's related to trying to tie magnetism and gravity together. And gravity is also linked to electromagnetism in this very interesting dance. Now, what he's going to show you here is something that's very counterintuitive to normal physics. Okay? When you bring very powerful magnets together, you would think that the field gets bigger. Instead, what tends to happen is it gets more powerful, but the field itself contracts. And in the middle, you get this incredible black hole of anti-spatial flow of matter. It's amazing. So I want to show you that. And again, I encourage you to go check out his podcast because it's absolutely mind-bending and very clear the way he describes it. And as he says, he's got a free book, so you can dive very deep into it. And he bases all of this on Tesla's ideas. God bless his cotton socks and his heart. Let's listen a bit further to what Ken has to say when we start to introduce a very powerful magnet to the other to see the deformities or the interactions between the two fields, the spatial and the counterspatial, creating the dialectic circuit of magnetism and electricity.
Out of 2. You'll notice as I get it closer, hard to keep it from snapping together, I don't want to break the glass, that at first the black hole gets a little larger. Notice the flux lines diverging. You see that? Now wait, what happens when I bring it together? Look at what's forming before I bring it together. You see that that ring of light? As I get closer, let me get it so you can get a better view. As I get closer, the black turns into a ring of light. See if I can zoom in so you can see it. Here we go. Hold on a second. There we go. A ring of light.
Now it's a pure torus.
It's the center of the magnet. These two magnets are now effectively one, even though they're separated by a couple of thin pieces of precision glass. The center where no magnetism exists, there's a halo of light. Oh, that almost sounds spiritual. Yeah, did you go figure that one, huh? So now let's take a look at something else. Let me move the magnets away so I don't destroy my iPad. Let me zoom out a little bit.
Now, in case you don't understand what the whole torus thing is, maybe watch this graphic here. It'll kind of help.
Okay. There we go. Let's hit play. Well, there are no straight lines in the universe, so we're talking about a point-line divergence. Let's reset that. Find the center. Curvilinear. This is the hypertrochoid. Reciprocating, precessional, hyperboloid. It's as simple as that. This is the pattern of the hypertrochoid. That is the hypertrochoid.
There you go. That is some of the amazing features that you can see with something like this ferrofluid, less than a nanometer ferrofluid between precision glass put next to very powerful magnets. It starts to display a lot of stuff that science really struggles to, at this moment in time, explain with its very casual textbook explanation. Tesla understood this much better, and with that came a far higher degree of technological understanding, because not only did he understand this in an incredible way, but he was also very in tune with the actual nature of the universe. He was having a conversation with it, and therefore was able to bring this information in and out of reality. I want to play this very last piece from Ken's video, and then we'll sign off.
They're going clockwise is the side closest to you. The darker lines moving in seemingly the opposite direction are in fact moving in the exact same direction. But the spatial vector of the polarity that defines a magnet is the inverse of counter space, inverse of inertia, inverse of zero-point energy. The conjugate principle of the universe is magnetism and dielectricity, the reciprocating precessional hyperboloid. The dark lines represent centripetal convergence. The white lines represent centrifugal divergence. So what you're seeing in the white lines is true magnetism. The light is actually hitting it and bending it along the lines of centrifugal divergence. The centripetal convergence, where light is literally going like water down a drain, is where you see these black voids in between the white lines. Okay? As you can see, these lines that are moving seemingly clockwise are closest to you. They're brighter. The darker lines is the other side of the magnet.
So there you have it, guys. And, just what a hero Nikola Tesla is. And let's just give a deep thanks to all that he brought us. Not just him, but many others, before him and many others that will come after him as well. We're, as a species, indebted to these kinds of people. Funny thought I want to leave you with as I sign off is, note how technology allows us these incredible jumps, how we sort of stay stagnant for a long time, sort of beating rocks into sharp pieces to, just be a little bit more primitive but effective as primal hunter-gatherers. And suddenly a bit of technology comes along and we make pyramids and megalithic structures and languages and all these amazing marvels and wonders. I mean, what's up with that, It's crazy. So, people like Tesla introducing us to incredible technologies. Look how much that advanced our species. When we have ancient stories about beings that perhaps bring technology to us, it makes sense how that would advance us for the next 6,000 years until we had geniuses like Tesla to really take us to the next level. The universe is yearning for people like that to go beyond the confines of the military-industrial complex and its control on society, both from above and on the ground. We need to shake ourselves of these people that have sucked up all the technology and the knowledge. And even if they don't give it to us, remember this, that most of these incredible discoveries have come from the depths of the human creative being able to interact with the universe itself. That is prana, that is the Akashic records, and that is the great machine of existence. My great pleasure to be a part of that machine with you this evening. I love you all. We'll see you in a week's time for the next episode of StoryTime. Episode 23 was a great success because, how can you go wrong when you talk about such a fascinating person like Nikola Tesla? But again, it's up to us to forge forward and create our futures and to ensure that the technology of Tesla is not forgotten. The story of his greatness is carried with all of us because it's an example, a challenge to all of us to rise to that amazing level. It's within our grasp. If he can do it in 1890, whatever, we can do it in 2023 and beyond. So to one and all, thank you so much. Catch you all on the flip side. Have yourselves a fantastic week going forward. And do check out Theoria Apophasis, Dark Journalist, and just all the amazing people that try and bring you high quality information and an open discussion. I might be right, I might be wrong, but I'm open to whatever you guys suggest and think and believe and want to engage with. That's the whole point of this dialectic. So with that, we sign off. Storytime episode 23. The Tesla vision and the deep state nightmare. I think that dream that that Tesla had for us is not too far off. If we get things right, it can be done. Only the future will tell. Things are going to get wild. So we'll be here to guide you with that. Do enjoy the rest of your week. We love you all. Peace out.